There is no greater transgression than to betray the Emperor's will. For a normal man there may be atonement for such a sin in death, but for a member of the Astartes, even the grave cannot hold suffering enough to pay for this crime. Chapter Master Caleb Kuln. War is the never-ending nightmare of the 42nd millennium. It has been the never-ending reality of the galaxy for much of its existence. Wars seem to appear for every reason. Religious fanaticism driving forward righteous crusades. The need to gain valuable resources outside of the Empire's reach. To defend against the nightmarish incursions from the warp. To sate the ambitions of those who seek glory for themselves. There is always a reason for war, but seldom is it heroic or glorious. This is the first in a series of videos documenting the conflict that would come to be known as the BADAB War. The pretext for the conflict would grow over time like a parasite, and when it was finally tackled, the unthinkable would happen. On a broad scale, those claiming to be loyal to the Imperium, and among its most valiant defenders, would turn on one another in a violent civil war. Carnage, destruction, and ruin would emerge as the dominant forces involved, the Adeptus Astartes, killed one another on a large scale. Brother, indeed, killed brother in a conflict almost echoing the times of the Horus Heresy. In this video, we are going to discuss the beginnings of this tragedy. The warp is a vital tool to us, a means of communication and transport. Without it, there would be no Imperium of Man, for there would be no quick bridges between the stars. We use it, and we harness it, but we have no absolute control over it. It is a wild thing that tolerates our presence, but brooks no mastery. There is power in the warp, fundamental power, not good nor evil, but elemental and anathema to us. It is a tool we use at our own risk. Primarch Horus Lupercal. There is a colossal monster looming at the core of the Milky Way galaxy. In fact, there are two monsters looming at the heart of the only home the human species has ever known. The first of these beating hearts is the center of the galaxy itself, a product of the materium, gravity, and galaxy formation. This monster's name is Sagittarius A, and it is a supermassive black hole as well as the nucleus of our galaxy. This spatial oddity contains 4,000 solar masses and commands the very fabric of space with its journey through the endless darkness of our universe. It draws clouds of materials towards it with its immense gravitational displacement, as well as drawing large numbers of stars into the cauldron that is the densely packed body of our galaxy. Not even light can escape its ever-hungering jaws. All of this activity, all of this close space, creates an environment which on its own would be extraordinary and exceptional. Additionally, many rare and heavy materials may be speculated to be created from its draw and the conditions it creates. Unique isotopes and specialized heavy elements are used by most spacefaring species in the world of Warhammer 40,000, so this region of space, despite its hostility, offers incredible amounts of resources for those who can exploit it safely. This by itself would make the sector of space worthy of investigation. The wizened behemoth at the heart of the galaxy has many treasures in its enormous influence, many of those treasures born by its sheer power. It may create the spaces empires crave for their materials, but not places where they can live and thrive so easily. If this weren't a certainty already from the extreme conditions of the galactic core, there is another monster lurking at the heart of the galaxy, in the universe of Warhammer 40,000. It intertwines with it like a twisting snake, coiling around its victim. The Second Leviathan, this rend in the fabric of the materium, is another ancient beast. The second largest Majoris-grade warp anomaly in the galaxy, this beast finds its home overlapping the galactic southwest core, placing itself between it and Holy Terra itself. The human designation for this place of madness and misery is the Maelstrom. The origin of this warp storm remains unknown, though many have speculated. Some offer that it is a naturally occurring event, while others claim that it may be an old, healing wound in reality, the birth tear of another warp entity in ages past. And though we may not know its origin, there is evidence that it predates the evolution of modern humans at the very least. The truth of it will never be definitively known, but it does have unique properties as compared to its more erratic counterparts. For instance, compared to its most famous sister storm, the Eye of Terror, the Maelstrom is relatively calm by the standards of warp events. Though this hellish nightmare, a plague upon the very fabric of reality, has this degree of, quote, calm, unquote, it is still unknowable. Many have journeyed near its borders or into the rifts themselves, having gone mad or having been lost trying to chart this dangerous break in the sea of space. There is no true rhyme that can be deciphered. There is no truth that can be found, for even if it lacks the turbulence of the Eye of Terror, it is still a place of madness and death. Within its borders resides the gateway to a reality best described as hell. The galaxy is cursed that so much material wealth exists on the fringes of this hellscape. The region known as the Maelstrom Zone lays on the edge of the horizon of the warp storm for which it is named, and is where the Imperium delves into the resource-rich worlds and regions that lay just outside the storm and the galactic core. For its entire history with mankind, however, the Maelstrom has been a dangerous entity. Shifting borders can expand the storm into the Maelstrom Zone at a moment's notice, shifting and blending the line between reality and unreality, cutting off would-be prospectors, mining facilities, and population centers, or driving others to madness as they are exposed to the worst that the warp has to offer in the material realm. Demonic incursions also vomit themselves into real space from inside this region, and drifting space hulks emerge with unknown horrors assaulting human worlds. Orc pirates and petty warlords are common and known quantities, both before and after the rise of the Imperium of Man from within the Maelstrom Zone. To add yet more, Eldari Corsairs and Drukhari use this region of space as their own haven as well. Worst of all, this is to say nothing of renegade Chaos Space Marines or even legionaries using it as a base of operations. Finally, there are older, more obscure, darker entities that lay within the realm of the Maelstrom and the surrounding regions. From ancient horrors to eldritch nightmares, all awaiting to be accidentally found and awakened. This is the poisoned chalice that is the space around the flowing nightmare of the warp. Perhaps the Maelstrom was placed there as a curse, to draw the eyes of the avarice and the greedy. Even before the Imperium of Man itself, humans during the Dark Age of technology were drawn to the Maelstrom and what would come to be known as the Maelstrom Zone in order to acquire the rare and unique materials created by the galactic conditions nearby. Worlds within the Maelstrom and in space around it often have felt the touch of chaos or other abominations from the warp as well, due to their proximity to this nightmarish storm of unreality. During the Great Crusade, mankind's first true return to the stars since the Dark Age of technology, attempts would be made to tame this region of space and the Maelstrom, though this endeavor would end in failure, with the cost of immense resources to the Imperium as ships and armies vanished into it and the space around it, consumed by the enemies of the Imperium that lay within. In the years following the heresy, the Imperium would take special attention to reinforce the region, recognizing it as a threat to its stability and beginning to fortify the location against incursions from aliens and traitors. It's significant to note as well that a major portion of the Wordbearer's Chaos Legionaries would escape into the Maelstrom after the Horus Heresy. These extremely dangerous fanatics would make their home on the demon world and hellforge of Gomlek, along with a contingent of the Dark Mechanicum. This force would be the most dangerous threat to the Imperium from the Maelstrom until after the events of the BADAB War. Fortified by the Imperium, human-colonized worlds in the Maelstrom would become paramount to the importance of this new era. Between the severe conditions of the galactic core creating few habitable worlds, and difficulties with navigation and exploration, least of all taking in the vile influence of the Maelstrom, the worlds of the Maelstrom Zone held in Imperial hands would be valued far beyond their typical worth. The wealth and resources which flowed from the Maelstrom created the need to invest further in the region and to protect it with vigor. In this, 3 prominent regions would appear, each held by important worlds at their core. These would be Siganax, Sagan, and BADAB. Millennia would pass as the Imperium harvested resources from the zone. This created an immense amount of wealth for the Imperium of Man, and provided for ships, war materials, and other goods across the Imperium itself, as well as shoring up the overall power of the Empire regionally. It's important to note that the biggest beneficiary was in fact the Carthago sector, which took in these raw materials, paying their Siganax, Sagan, and BADAB middlemen handsomely to create finished products, which would then be sold on to other sectors, creating an immense amount of economic activity for their region, especially near the end of the 40th millennium. This abundance and prosperity would come under threat consistently. Imperial-held worlds in the subsector were subject to the whims of the giant that was the Maelstrom, whose patterns of destruction could never be fully predicted or understood. Worlds would go quiet as their inhabitants may be driven mad. Others may see their worlds assaulted by Drukhari or orcs, and be left with few to none of their populations. The Imperium had no dedicated force for dealing with these, even as resources were occasionally diverted to deal with individual problems. The most consistent wardens of the region were the Mantis Warriors, whose home world, Otheka, existed inside the Endymion cluster inside the Maelstrom Zone itself. This lone Astartes chapter would find itself policing this vital territory to the Imperium, but was unable to perform their task to a satisfactory level. Unable to pull back, and unable to push forward, the Mantis Warriors would stand witness to the event that would send the region into the depths of darkness and heresy. Gunfire and las weaponry echoed through the halls beyond them as Siren looked over the controls once again, his masked face shifting from light to darkness before he turned back to Kolo. He needed to finish the decryption while they still had time. They could only hold this place for a few more minutes before this grand gesture to an unfeeling existence may be spoiled. It would be all too fitting, wouldn't it? The futility of it all. The end result would be the same for them, but they would never break the cycle that gripped this horrible world. Inside the darkened command center, the lights flickered all about them as displays brought up various numbers. Things which he didn't understand, but thankfully his brother Kolo did. Soon they would all be free of this torture. Every last person on this husk of a world Siganax would be. "They are coming!" Renaya shrieked from the door, locking her magazine back into place as several loud thuds exploded in the battle. Astartes. Signax was a heavily militarized world, a hive world which was the linchpin of a series of systems and trade routes around it. One of the great islands created by the Imperium to ensure the flow of raw materials out of the Maelstrom Zone. It was a fortress. The safe port in the literal storm that was all around them made it an invaluable asset to continue the exploitations of resources locally. In the 41st millennium, however, during the year 557, the world was corrupted in a rapid series of events. This would lead to the rise of the death cult of Nihilists, who would attempt to overwhelm their own world. It would quickly turn into a bloodbath and a massacre as they charged headlong into their own defenders. The resulting bloody clashes saw the Imperium lose ground on their own world to heretics who seemingly came out of nowhere, spreading like a cancer from within. Whole cities burned in the fury of these psychopathic nihilists, seemingly only bent on destruction. They would be bolstered by another force, which was just as significant during the conflict, the Chaos Space Marine renegades known as the Reborn. In the world's darkest hour, besieged from within by their own populace, and attacked from without by an elite force of savage killers, they would find themselves squeezed to the limit. The arrival of the Mantis Warriors would see them seemingly begin to regain control of the situation until the cultists on the planet would take a key military installation, giving them some access to the strategic weapons stockpile on the world. In an act of brutal barbarity, self-destruction, and malice, they would launch much of the world's nuclear and plasmic warheads against itself.
Is it ready? We're running out of time.
I think I have it! Klaxons blared throughout the structure as Siren smiled behind his mask. Gunfire grew louder and more desperate as explosive rounds of the enemy grew closer and closer. Their deaths wouldn't have mattered anyway, but now everyone would experience how pointless it all was. They would see what the malicious voices had whispered to him in the darkness of Hive City C1.
Siren!
Renaya asked, her voice nervous.
Lord Maleficent! Is it ready? Are these the last moments before we see the peace of the void?
breathing in and out carefully, his mind tuning out the encroaching battle approaching them. Siren, master of the cult which now swarmed this world, closed both his eyes gratefully as he gently placed his right hand on the command keys, hitting the sequence he knew would begin the end of the world. All he needed to do was to turn the final key, and they would have all that they desired, and would deliver it onto every living thing upon his world. His feral instinct for self-preservation tried clinging on to him to get him to stop. It clawed in his stomach and his heart, trying to pull itself up from within him one final time. One final time trying to let him remain in this sick world. He knew the truth, though. He heard it in the two-faced whispers which had not left him alone for almost a year. The same ones that laughed as he and his cult savaged and burned his own world. There was no truth in this life. There was nothing. Shoving it down, he built up his courage, letting his voice open up as he grabbed the final key in the console. I am the one who grabs hold of the white and the black. I am the one who stares into the abyss and knows that there is only nothing. I am the one who sees annihilation. With that, Siren, Lord Maleficent of the Cult of the Void, twisted the key and unleashed the annihilation he sought. 5 cities would be shattered and obliterated before the planet's orbit was destabilized, sending it veering off course within its star system. Signax went from being a hive world of the Imperium to a dead, frozen wasteland, drifting into the outer reaches of its star system. A dead husk of no use to anyone save scavengers. With the death of Signax, the Imperium's ability to influence the northern portion of the Maelstrom Zone collapsed. Trade imploded along with it as ships lost the ability to find ports for jumps next to such a violent warp storm. Mining stations, outposts, and distant Imperial worlds were left without assistance or recourse. Many of these places would vanish into the darkness of space, never to be heard from again, while others desperately clung to the last tethers of support throughout the zone. The result of this devastating loss would rally the Imperium to provide a response. The High Lords of Terra themselves would order several Space Marine chapters to permanently occupy the region and bring it back under Imperial control in order to re-establish the vital trade routes and mining facilities needed to feed the voracious appetite of the Imperium for the rare materials the region provided. Little did they know, this vital step would push the Imperium into one of the worst civil wars it would experience since the Horus Heresy. The BADAB War. In our next episode, we will look at the heroic figure who changed the face of the Maelstrom Zone, and who would become the primary belligerent of the separatist side of the conflict. Join us for Part 2, The Rise of the Tyrant. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. In addition, we run live streams on this channel every single day, and we'd be happy for you to join us. If you have any thoughts or feedback, please let me know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching.